I've heard of gross profit, but gross margin, that's
Okay.
new to me.
All right. So gross profit is the dollars. Gross margin is the percentage.
Okay.
It's the same line on the P&L, right? So you have your direct expenses or cost of goods sold, labor, materials, labor taxes, those kinds of things. And again, for most businesses, that's going to be around half, let's say. So let's say we have 47% of our expense of our revenue is spent on direct expenses like labor, materials, job supplies, that kind of stuff. That would leave 53% that goes down to the next bunch of categories, which is overhead expenses. That means we have a 53% gross margin.
Okay.
So for most companies, again, depending on how you and your CPA have your cost of goods sold set up, you may have something where this what I'm about to say is not applicable to you, and that's fine. But for most companies, service-based companies, home, auto, B2B, service-based companies, if you're below a 40% gross margin, that means 60%, more than 60% of your revenue is spent on direct expenses like labor and materials and those kinds of things. If your gross margin's under 40%, in most cases, we're getting into some thin ice there. If you're at 60 to 65% plus, now many companies, Microsoft runs like 92%. I mean, or 99%, or like Apple's like it's way up there, right? But for most of us who are providing services to, either B2C or B2B, um, if we're over 60%, maybe 65%, that means only 35 to 40% of our revenue is going to overhead things like labor and materials. I would say, especially in today's market, we're probably getting where we're not paying the employees what would be necessary to have a long-term plan for retention.
So in order to grow and maintain, you need to keep it in that sweet spot?
Yeah, so first thing is you got to know what your sweet spot is. So a roofing company might be different than an accounting firm, would definitely be different than a property management company, for example. So the first thing is what is a good target gross margin for my industry? The second thing is what's normal for us. So do we tend to hover around 47% and 52%? That's a kick-ass year for us? Or we normally are around 52% and this year we're only at 46. What's going on?
Okay.
So having a handle on what me and my CPA agree on is a good target for us based on what is good for what generally works for our industry, but also having a handle on what is normal for us. And that what is normal for us on the P&L is one of the first things I want to help people establish is what tells me there's a red flag. If materials is usually between 15% and 18%, all of a sudden it's 22%, I know that's a red flag. If I don't know it's usually between 15 and 18%, I see 22% and I wouldn't even know to pay attention to that. So gross margin, like many of these other top 6 or 8 expenses, first task is what's the goal? What's normal for us? What would tell us this red flag? Yeah, for sure.